Imagine a world where the first atomic bomb didn't fall on Hiroshima, but on Berlin, or was never dropped at all. Imagine the Soviet Union hoisting their red flag not just in Berlin, but in Paris, even in London. And imagine a present day where America as a global superpower never existed. For years, many Americans believed that the wars in Europe and Asia were simply none of their business. This movement had a name: isolationism, and it almost won. Today, we will explore this terrifying yet fascinating scenario, a world where the United States never intervened in the Second World War.
To understand this scenario, we first need to look back at actual history. After the First World War, the United States chose to withdraw from world affairs. Charles Lindbergh and the America First Committee traveled across the country, calling for America to stay neutral, no matter what happened on the European continent. Congress even passed a series of neutrality acts in the 1930s. Meanwhile, in Europe, Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany began annexing one country after another. In Asia, the Empire of Japan invaded China and expanded its territory across the Pacific. Behind closed doors, American factories continued producing weapons to sell to Britain and France, even as the public fiercely opposed entering the war. America kept watching from afar, until the morning of December 7th, 1941. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor killed more than 2,400 people and sank American warships in a matter of hours. It was that very attack that finally dragged the United States fully into the war. But what if that attack had never happened?
This is the turning point of our story. Scenario 1. Japan decides not to attack Pearl Harbor. Some historians suggest that if the radar signals at Pearl Harbor that morning had been given more attention, the attack could have been detected earlier and called off before it even began. A few Japanese generals were actually hesitant. They knew waking America's industrial giant was a massive gamble.
If we attack the American base, we wake a sleeping giant. But if we don't, they will keep strengthening their fleet. Better focus on resources in the south. I hope we don't regret this.
Without that attack, American public opinion remained divided. The vast majority of the people still refused to enter a war on another continent. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who actually wanted to help the Allies, lacked the political support to deploy troops. Without that moment, the historic speech that ignited the war spirit of an entire nation would never have been delivered.
Mr. President, congressional support for deploying troops is still far too weak.
The public doesn't see this as their fight yet.
America continued to help, but only through the Lend-Lease program, sending weapons, ammunition, and supplies without deploying a single soldier. And without American troops, the millions of forces meant to land in Normandy would never arrive. Without a second front in Western Europe, who was going to stop Hitler? The answer fell entirely on the shoulders of the Soviet Union, who was already fighting for its life on the Eastern Front. Without massive supplies from America, the Red Army would have run out of trucks, food, and ammunition much faster.
Supplies from our allies in the West are shrinking with every passing week.
We must rely entirely on domestic production now.
Then victory will still be ours, but at the cost of far more blood.
The war on the Eastern Front could have lasted 2 or even 3 years longer than it actually did. Millions more lives would have been lost, both soldiers and civilians, in this drawn-out conflict. American weapons factories kept spinning, but their shipments had to cross oceans infested with German U-boats, rather than being carried directly by American soldiers themselves. The supplies that made it through were far from enough to counter the full force of a German military now fighting on both fronts simultaneously. Meanwhile, in Britain, Winston Churchill fought on alone, bombarded every single night by the Luftwaffe. Without American industrial and military might, Britain may not have been able to hold out forever. Some historians speculate that without the hope of American aid, Britain might have been forced to negotiate a peace treaty with Germany. If that had happened, Hitler would have controlled nearly all of mainland Western Europe with virtually no resistance.
Without American support, how long can we hold out? As long as our people stand tall, but supplies are low, we should negotiations. Negotiating with a tyrant only delays destruction.
And the full power of Nazi Germany could then be directed entirely toward crushing the Soviet Union.
Let's shift to the other side of the world, the Pacific Ocean. Without Pearl Harbor, U.S.-Japan relations remained tense, but never exploded into open warfare. This meant Japan was free to continue its expansion across Southeast Asia without interference from the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The Philippines, Indonesia, Malaya, and perhaps even Australia could have fallen completely under the grip of the Empire of Japan. Millions of people in these regions would have lived under harsh military occupation far longer than in actual history. Without American involvement, the secret atomic bomb program, the Manhattan Project, might never have been built on such a scale.
Without full government support, this project is moving far slower than we hoped. Perhaps this weapon will never be finished in time. If that's the case, then this war will be decided on the battlefield.
That meant Japan could have kept fighting for years to come without the threat of a weapon of mass destruction. The war in the Pacific could have turned into a far bloodier conflict, costing immeasurably more lives.
Now, let's look at the bigger picture, the long-term impact of a world without America in this war. First, the Holocaust. Without Germany's swift defeat, this atrocity could have continued much longer, claiming far more lives. Second, the Soviet Union, though exhausted, likely would have still won on the Eastern Front, but at a vastly higher cost. That means when the war finally ended, the Red Army might have kept advancing, much deeper into Western Europe. Paris, Brussels, and perhaps even Madrid all could have fallen under Soviet influence, not just East Berlin. The Cold War as we know it, between America and the Soviet Union, might never have happened in the same way. Instead, the world might have witnessed a single dominating superpower, the Soviet Union, with no real counterweight. And the United States? It might have remained a strong regional power, but no longer the leader of the free world.
How would this war actually end? The most likely scenario? The Soviet Union defeats Germany single-handedly, though at a cost of lives far greater than in actual history. In Asia, the war against Japan would likely drag on until the late 1940s, perhaps even longer. Some historians suggest that Britain and the Commonwealth nations might have eventually stepped up their role in the Pacific to replace America. But without America's massive industrial engine, the Allied victory in the Pacific would have come much slower and far bloodier. And without the atomic bomb to bring the war to a swift end, a full-scale land invasion of the Japanese mainland might have actually taken place. An invasion that, according to many historians, could have claimed millions of additional lives, both military and civilian.
The territories we have liberated will remain under our sphere of influence.
That means half this continent will change colors overnight.
History is always written by those standing on the battlefield, not at the negotiating table.
Now, let's jump far ahead. What would our world look like today in this alternate timeline? The UN, as we know it, might never have been formed with the same structure and power. The European Union, which was born from a desire to prevent another war, might have taken a completely different shape, or not existed at all. The US dollar might never have become the world's reserve currency. That role could have fallen into entirely different hands. And most importantly, the world might be living under the shadow of a single dominating superpower, rather than two balancing each other out. History, as it turns out, often hinges on a single decision, a single morning, a single second that changes everything.
So, in your view, what kind of world would have been born from this scenario? A darker, more divided world, but one that teaches us just how fragile the history we know truly is.
Fortunately for us, or perhaps not merely by luck, history chose a different path. In your opinion, what would be the most surprising impact of this scenario? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more alternate history scenarios.